Hi there, welcome to this episode of Isn't She Amazing? I'm Lorna and this is Marianne, and today we're going to talk about how you run a marathon.
A good thing, Lorna, is maybe like, how does a non-runner run a marathon?
Oh, that's right. How does a non-runner run a marathon?
There. So let's
because
just,
we were both non-runners and we ran a marathon.
that's right. And we did it one step at a time. But the thing we were talking, I think that's kind of poignant, Lorna, is we were talking about what would even prompt somebody. I mean, I hated to run. I thought it's a stupid sport. I don't think I
So did
ever
I.
felt endorphins, to before that. It was like, why do people do this to themselves? And then all of a sudden one day I woke up and said, I think I need to run a marathon.
Well, I used to always, you remember back in the day, like everybody would watch Oprah at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so she'd run a marathon. And I remember I was like, if Oprah can run a marathon, I can run a marathon. And so it was kind of on this bucket list that I have in my head, as my husband says. And
but
so when
you had a life transition. You had a tragedy that kind of spurred that on.
So I had that kind of in the back of my head, but I was like, I have like I'm a mom with these young kids. What am I going to do this? And then my mom was diagnosed with cancer and she passed away. And after she passed away, I just was having a really hard time, and I just was depressed, and I'd never dealt with anything like that. And she was such a big person in my life, so I went to dinner with a friend, and she said she was training for a marathon, and she was at 3 miles, and I hadn't run because I was in college, and I didn't like it then either. But I was like, I'm in. If I run 3 miles, I can do it.
Well, that's awesome. And but it prompted me, a kind of a life transition prompted me to run one as well, because I was probably 50 before I even started trying to run. And we were expats in Tokyo. And it was our first expat assignment. Our kids were all in college at that point. And I really had a hard time kind of figuring things out. Everything was unfamiliar, and I could feel myself slipping into a depression. And I knew enough as a therapist that I was the one that was responsible to pull myself out of that. And
Right.
So I thought, what would make me feel better? And always walking or exercising will help pick up my attitude a little bit. So I thought, I guess I was pretty deep to say, well, maybe I'll just run a marathon. and that, tell me about the feeling the first time you got to, was it 3 miles where you said, hey, I can do this? Or
Yeah, I did that. And then I had a good friend, and he's like a runner, but he's not a distance runner. He's a fast runner. So when he heard that I was running this marathon, he's like, you're not a runner. And I was like, you're right. I'm not a runner, but I'm going to run this marathon. And I will never forget. So I ran it in Maui. I ran it, my girlfriend and I trained, and we were going to Maui. And right before we left for the trip, I ran into him at the soccer field. Now, let me back up a second. So we were like, when I got to 16 miles, I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. Like, I am actually going to do this. How did I get to 16 miles? Now, I still had 10 more miles to get to, but I was like, that was like mentally, that was like a big shift for me.
That's huge. I think, my big shift was maybe because I was older than you. I think when I did my first marathon, 5 miles was my moment.
I was 40. I was right turning 40.
Okay, yeah. But it was 5 miles was my aha moment, because this new place, we lived about a mile from the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, and around the palace was a 5K track right around the palace. I mean, and it was flat, so it was really much better than running in the hills of Virginia, right?
Like this.
That's right.
Yeah, like, for the love. And we run in a flat area.
I know. So when I went home to Virginia, I would practice on the hills, and that would help get me in better shape.
Oh, yeah.
But it was the first time I ran mile to the palace, 3 miles around the palace, 1 mile back to my apartment, and it was like flew in my door and said, I am amazing. And that feeling was just, I mean, I can feel that feeling to this day. And it
Oh,
just,
you
it
can put
kept
yourself
me
back in there,
going.
like when you, and it was like literally, I always said, and I still say it, it was mind over matter because my
Yeah,
body was like, I do not want to do this. I had knee pain. I injured my knee during the process. But
well,
I
I
used
did
to just
too.
like, yeah,
Why
still
not?
bothers me to this day, but that's another story. Yeah, I was just like, I'll just run to that car. Now I got to run to that tree. Now I got to run to the stop sign. And then before you knew it, you were done. Like you were done for the day. So
Well, I
it is, you do feel like you're amazing. It's like, I just can't, like when you actually get in the car and you drive 26.2 miles, it's a
it's
long
far.
way.
Yeah, it's far. That's right. But there's so many good things that came from that is that not being a runner. One thing I found, your friend who said you're not a runner, that kind of ticks me off because
It ticked me
people
off.
who are real runners, they really kind of are elitists as far as
So I
who's,
said to,
who's a
so
runner.
what I said to him, I
What?
said, when I saw him at the soccer field, I was getting ready to leave the next week, and he's like, "You did it. I'm so proud of you. You did it."
Oh,
And I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's true." I said, "So when I come back, it's going to be Lorna, marathon runner, you runner."
right.
I am a marathon runner,
And you are amazing.
and I am amazing, and you're just an average runner.
Good girl. That's right. But you did some good things there. And I think both of us did something too, is your girlfriend who said to you, I'm in. Yeah, or I'm going to do this. And you said, I'm in. And then didn't you gather a couple other friends
Yeah,
to
there were
join you?
5 of us that did it. And so some did the half marathon. And so 4 of us did the half marathon. 1 or 2 did the half. And so, yeah, we all trained. We would train. Sometimes we would all train together. Sometimes we trained individually. If we did the long runs, we would all go into DC and run. But yeah, it was great. It was like this big community. It was this community. Like we shared each other on, and even my partner. Like there were some days, I'm sure you remember, when you had those long runs. They were hard. Like some were harder than others. And she was really cute because she would, if I had a hard time, she would dance and she was singing and she'd run backward.
And I wouldn't have that much energy. I couldn't really talk when I was
It's like,
running.
please, we're running. I'm not really enjoying this, but it was fun. And we also, I think for us, when you talk about community or doing something difficult during a hard time,
Mhm.
her dad actually passed away soon after. So
Oh gosh.
we were kind of like it was therapeutic for us. We laughed and we cried and we told each other stories about our parents, and it really did just help us both get through that time. And we accomplished we have this big accomplishment that we did.
And that's
And
huge.
it was huge. It was huge in so many ways because it helped us mentally, it helped us physically, and it gave us bragging rights because now we'd finished a marathon.
That's right, because and again, what we're talking about is we want everybody that listens to our podcast to know how amazing they are and to feel what that feels like to go,
Right.
yes, yes,
I can
I am
do it.
amazing. And you did some cool things. You had a heartbreak that you went through with the death of your mom.
Mhm.
And just like when I had a depression that I was going through that I had to overcome. And so
Because you left everything. You were alone. You had left everything you knew.
that's right. That's right. And you created a community, and I
You
created a
did too.
community. I had a Japanese friend who actually ran that marathon a lot. And she was about 10 years older than I was, maybe even more than that at that time. But she was not going to run the marathon that time. It wasn't the Tokyo Marathon. It was called the Kasumi Marathon outside of Tokyo. And but she and a couple of the other expats that we knew, we said, well, we're going to run the 10 mile, they're going to run the 10-mile part. And so that's how I found my community. Is I didn't have anybody else that wanted to run the marathon at that time, but I really needed somebody to kind of at least talk to about it. And so we would meet and run different amounts of time together. And but it was important. It gave us something in common. And then that community helped pick up my spirits. And I felt like I belonged to something.
But and I also think like the other thing like it brought to light was, it takes a lot of time to train for something like that.
Yeah.
But you can make the time and still do everything else you're supposed to do. And I think many times I do is like, I don't have time for that because I'm so busy, or I don't. And I think we all fall into that. We feel like that's a big time commitment. But if it is something that you really want to do, you can fit it into your life.
And it's important self-care.
And it's important. It's really important to do that.
That was something I think we each really needed at that time. And so that, one day it might just be 15 minutes you were running, but then on a Saturday, it might be 6 hours you were running because you were getting up to the 20
Well, that was
range.
when I told you the story earlier about when it was raining, and
tell me.
I'm like, oh, I get to stay in bed. It's Saturday. We're going to do a long run. And my girlfriend called and said, hey, I'll be there in 10 minutes to pick you up. And I'm like, it's pouring rain.
Aww.
And she's like, oh, just get a trash bag, cut a hole in it, put it on you, and that's going to be your raincoat, and we can get rid of it if we don't need it. But then we're not stuck carrying a rain jacket.
Yeah.
We did. And we did.
And you pulled each other through. And that is so huge. And so I just really think, so many women our age have life transitions. We have our ups and downs. We have retirements and all other kinds of things that kind of throw us for,
and kids are growing up and
empty nests and all that stuff. And we don't know where to turn, and we don't know what to do, and we don't know how to shake out of the funk we feel like we're in. But I will tell you that marathon did that for me, and it sounds like it did it for you.
Oh, it totally did that for me. It was huge for me. It just totally got me over the hump.
So what action steps can we ask our audience to take if they feel like they're in a funk, they feel like they maybe they're in a life transition, maybe they're going through some grief, maybe they're getting divorced and they're feeling kind of down. What should they do today to get, like, what's a first step they can do?
I think they think about what they've always, if there's some big challenge they've wanted to do, and write it down.
Yeah.
They say if you write it down, it starts to make it more real. Or send it in the chat. Send it into the chat. What is that one thing that you're like, oh, that seems like it's so impossible to do, but I would love to say that I've done it, or I'd love to do that and take that challenge on.
And it would even help the other women that are watching the podcast. Like, I don't know, I can't come up with an idea. If you post your idea in the chat, then they'll get ideas that way too. Because I think it's so important to support each other and have a group. And even if the one thing you do today is you go online, and again, it doesn't have to be a marathon, but this is what we're talking about. So we'll make it about that. You go online and just write marathons in the United States or wherever you want to go. There's marathons everywhere. Marathons, half marathons, 5K. I mean, you could start at a 5K.
Or even like, even like, I know, like I did a half marathon, because I did do more half marathons. I did the one marathon, but I did several half marathons. And like some are fun, like the rock and roll. There's lots of those, and those are fun because I
think my college roommate did that. I think my college roommate did a rock and roll marathon, and I was thinking about that. Yeah, maybe we'll have to do that.
Or if you're in DC, like the one that's really cool, it's hard to get into, you have to really plan, is the Army. The 10K. That's really neat because you get to run through the all the monuments, and it's pretty flat.
And so there's like every month there is a choice of places you can go. There's another one in Diamond Head in Hawaii on the Big Island. I think there's a marathon down there. I was thinking of doing that and I never got around to it. So but I know they do it. And
put that in the chat, Marianne.
That's right. Put in the chat. So and then I looked up trainers, and I thought marathon training, because since I was a non-runner and since I thought it was a stupid
Oh, yeah,
sport,
yeah.
I thought, how am I ever going to train to do this? How am I going to be disciplined enough? And sure enough, marathon trainers. There's a Hal Higdon was a marathon trainer, and I think there was another site like Marathon Training.
Oh, there's a ton, because we did the same, because we would get our training plans off of that.
Yes,
So
and you could just print it right out.
right. And so that's how we would plot. And like
Yeah.
with her and I, because we had young kids at the time, we would, during the week, we would run on our own. We would train on our own, and we did the long runs on the weekend together.
And you can reverse engineer it in your training plan, because some of those things will say, I want to run a marathon in May, you know, when can you start? You know, and so do you want to have 6 months of training, which is actually what I would have done in your shoes, because you had to train through the winter. I would have just done 6 months. But, you know, or if you want to train.
Yeah, we were really cold. There were so many days I was like, oh, it's so cold. Or it's windy, because it's when it's windy and you're running against that wind.
And it's icy.
And yeah, it was terrible.
Many days you were probably thinking, what am I thinking? What have I done?
I don't know about you, but I do a lot of those things where I talk, it's like this self-talk, like, Lorna, this is a bad idea. But I keep doing it. I just go and I do it.
And sometimes that's the most fun and most rewarding.
And it gives you the best stories, because then you can say, I just thought this is like not a really bright thing to do, but you do it. You did it, and you're amazing. We're amazing.
We're amazing, absolutely. And everybody out there is amazing. So any final thoughts about that?
Nope, just go out and do what you always wanted to do. And we look forward to hearing all of your thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm Marianne.
I'm Lorna.
And thanks for joining our Isn't She Amazing podcast. You are amazing.